I was recently solicited by two different organizations to consider applying for a position at their organization. It caused me to think, if I got offered a high-paying or interesting position, would I take it at this point? I'm only a month and a half into early retirement. I was thinking, would I take it if I applied for the job, interviewed, and got it? What makes this interesting are these are two very well-known established organizations in my profession, and these positions would be natural progressions to the positions I've held in the past if I wanted to move up the ladder. I'm telling you, when I was looking at the positions though, if you would ask me 5 years ago, I would have jumped all over it. I would have been applying for it. I was solicited over the years, but I never really was interested in to move on at this point in time. And I was fairly comfortable with the job I was in. But if I had known what was going to happen in the last 3-4 years of the job I just left, I would have done everything to get out and move on. And I might be in a different position right now. I might be in a different context and situation that I would enjoy continuing to work, because I've enjoyed working. I've enjoyed what I've done, and I've enjoyed almost all of the organizations I've worked for, except for two. I just hate to think about ending my career on such a sour note, all just for a couple people, and so as I'm contemplating this past month and a half has been a very interesting transition for me to go from a very scheduled, structured life to not having to wake up, not having to be anywhere particular except for a few specific times, having an enormous amount of time to think, to enjoy, to relax, to rest my mind, and to spend time with my wife, the family, and then just be in the place that I want to be in. These are some of the reasons why I wouldn't want to go back to work. So after 30 years of working all over the world in more than 12 countries and in different offices with multicultural, diverse colleagues, I think I just can't do it anymore. And it's not the work itself, it's everything around that comes with the work. And largely, that's people. I hate to say it, it's people. I like to work with people. It's just, unfortunately, it's only a handful of people that can really ruin your experience. If you can relate, give me an amen. So hopefully this is not a rant about individuals. It's more of things that were difficult, and the biggest reasons why I would not want to go back into that if I don't have to. Maybe I've changed. Maybe the world has changed. I'm not sure. But the older I get, the more I know what I want, and even more importantly, more what I don't want. So the first one is office politics over competency. I was never good at office politics. I was always just good at the job. And when I would watch people, the ass kissers, the brown nosers, we call them, it's really hard to watch that and to see the leader or the type of managers who like that type of person. I was not that type of person. I was respectful, and I was cordial, and I was friendly, but I didn't kiss butt. One guy comes to mind, and I was just like, he was like the NGO bimbo. He'll do whatever he's told by whoever is in charge of him. He's got very evidently some political ambitions behind him, and he wants to move up and make a name for himself. I can't blame him for that for some reason. It's just not me. People like that, I had a hard time being around because I didn't trust them. They would do anything to get ahead and to put themselves at an advantage over you. This was a big one. Dancing around poor leadership. I know there's some recency bias here. I've had two very, very good leaders, one exceptional leader. Most of them were good leaders that I would stand behind. And there's a few who were poor, unqualified, and then there's two who were just completely incompetent, totally incompetent boobs. Strangely enough, one of the first ones I had was a boob at the beginning of my career, and the other one was a boob I had at the end of my career. And I would have to sit there reporting to him, letting him have the final say on a decision that had a big impact. And then even that, I knew that I couldn't trust him to follow through with his decision. He flip-flopped constantly. Some of them were not qualified. They just needed more experience. They were a little too green. And I think sometimes people in the position of power, there's a proverb around power. power corrupts. And I think that's what happened with some of the people who were prematurely put into position they just weren't ready for. Now, I already touched on this, unqualified colleague. This is a result of nepotism, favoritism, shows evidence of poor discernment on the recruiters, on the people who were recruiting. So not only was a colleague unqualified, he was not in the right position, but because he spoke well, because he was very eloquent and he did the politics and he kissed the butt the right way, he got put into that position and he's causing more harm than good. And I think, and then the person who should have been in that position was overlooked because that guy did not play the politics. He was one of the most technically competent people I've ever worked with. Well-rounded. He could do everything. The problem was he was a bit of a jackass. He was kind of a maverick. He did not play politics at all. He got on with the board, but he wasn't afraid to stand up to them and tell them where he thought was wrong. There was some recency bias here. The organization I left was a more amplified variation of a lot of these points I'm going to make. So I'm just using them as the most recent examples. I didn't see any accountability in the mistakes that were being made, and it was hard to watch the standard slip with one change of a leader. One change or ruin it all. Some of the things in the office were the fake friendliness. This was probably in most of the offices I was in. The water cooler talk. How was your day? How was your weekend? And when someone asks that question, they really want to tell you about their weekend. In the beginning, when I was earlier in my career, I did it. I went with it. But the older I got, the more I saw people doing that. I just couldn't take it anymore. The staff who always got to tell you about her kids and they're sick every week. I'm like, okay, let me guess what it is. You got a running news. And then you have the staff who used sick leave like it was annual leave. We had so many sick days allotted to us a year, and there was a couple staff, they used like it was annual leave. And then when it came to the end of the year, they had all this actual annual leave. And I'm like, geez, it seems like you're out every other week. I swear the two ladies in my finance department, they alternated every other week. One of them was going to be out. And there was a guy in the office who also did it. The mother's sick, the son's sick, the brother's sick, the family buffalo's sick. So I saw it all, and I could understand why people were taking advantage of it until the last year when I was quitting. The only time I really took off was when I was really, really sick or I had an operation. It was the only time I stayed home. I would go in with a cold, it's probably bad, but if I had to stay home, I still worked at home. The team bonding. I don't know if you're familiar with the NGO world, but they're famous for the team bonding. There were times where I really loved being with my colleagues, but there were times that I wasn't. Every year we would have a staff workshop and there would be these team bonding exercises. Maybe that's just adulthood, but it felt a little performative to me. The older I got, I had to be a little careful because there were some things in the NGO world that I don't agree with everything we did. And I think in the last organization I was with, I never disagreed more with the mission than that one. And I think part of it was the leadership change and the attitude. But, at times I had to be careful to keep my mouth shut. Otherwise, for some people, it could really hurt your career. I knew some of the things that I believed in what our strategy should have been. I knew it was going to be a very popular idea, especially with the general status quo of the type of people that I work with. So this is something where you don't lose your voice all at once. You lose your voice and a part of you little by little, and that can really whittle away at you. Some of the corporate rituals, in-house culture, the birthday cakes, the singing, we're all adults here. This is not a children's birthday party. It really depends on the person who's in HR. It was like another birthday cake. Fortunately, in this past year, it seemed like many of them were at a time when I wasn't in the office. We have to go into the conference room, stand in a circle, and sing happy birthday. And you could tell by the cake, some people were more favored than the others, or if they had a lunch included. And the irony was we didn't fix the budget and we wouldn't hold anybody accountable, but I'll be damned if we ever missed a birthday cake. Some of the mandatory fun things, the Christmas lunches, the staff for the most part liked it, or they liked any kind of opportunity that got them out of the office. But some of it just felt very outdated. It wasn't necessary for me, especially in this last organization. The endless meetings. Someone always had to have a meeting. Fortunately, a lot of the meetings went online, so I could be doing other things during the meeting. In some cases, not even be paying attention. Technology really helped alleviate some of that pain. And again, I bring up some of this stuff. It's not that these people's lives are not important. It's just part of it was I didn't want my life revolving around the small talk anymore. I just really wanted to do my job and move on. Most people don't care about your story except for the people who love you and your family and maybe your closest friends. Even your closest friends might not exactly want to be hearing about all your soccer games. So I hope this doesn't sound a little callous. Take some of this a little bit of tongue-in-cheek, but when I think about going back into sitting in an office, I think about the energy cost. The 8 hours of sitting there when I could be sitting in the comfort of my own home with my wife. The emotional side of it, and I lost a lot of sleep. I had a lot of anxiety. The walking on eggshells around certain people you couldn't trust, or certain people who were just so easily offended, or could easily make problems for you if you weren't being sensitive, whatever's going on in their mind. So the job wasn't exhausting, just the environment was exhausting. One thing I hear people say, they go into HR because they love people. I remember someone saying that one time in an interview. I'm like, what? If you love people, HR is one of the last departments you want to work in, unless you're new and you're that naive. Working in HR will make you dislike people. So why is it different now for me? Maybe I've changed. Maybe this last job may be a little jaded. I don't know. I've only had a month and a half of peace and clarity, and maybe that's changed me. Maybe I don't need the validation anymore. Having to have a better job and a bigger job and more responsibility. So once you've tasted autonomy, it's hard to go back to an environment where you have to ask permission for anything or everything. So as I was looking over these job descriptions 5-10 years ago, I would have been all over it. The one job, it would be a regional position, very prestigious in some ways, something I'm pretty confident I could do well at, but I would be traveling probably at least 25% of the year. I would be in countries that I really don't want to be in. I would be living in hotels, coming back to the house, packing, and having to manage, it's 7 or 8 countries with all their own individual problems. So that means 7 or 8 different country directors, 7 or 8 different finance directors, all the fallout, the employees after that. And then I'd have to be involved in any crises constantly. Talking about taking the job that I just had and amplifying the stress and the amount of workload probably by 10. And the other job is something that's in country, but I would have to get involved in local politics, going to an office again, being the lead. I'm like, there's still a lot of pressure with that I'm just not so sure that I want to have. When I ask this question, I think about what would be the biggest reason I would want to go back. There's been studies that show people who work 1 or 2 extra years only incrementally put themselves in a financial position that's better than if they would have quit. My biggest argument to potentially look at another job is because I don't have $1 million and I don't have FU money. FU money is where you can just tell everybody to piss off and you're comfortable, you're financially independent. I don't know how my finances are going to work out for me, and quite frankly, that's my biggest concern. So my biggest fear to go back to work is to add a little more buffer to my finances, and I know just 1 more year and even 2 would make a huge difference. So I'm like, do I want to do that? Let's say I work 2 more years. That would put me at the age of 59. So I essentially would lose 2 more years in my prime years of early retirement where I could just, live here simply with my wife. I don't care about the prestige. I don't care about the title. I don't care about the responsibility. I am happy to tell somebody I just don't work anymore. It's just the finances. Have you ever been in a circumstance like that? Take some of this with a grain of salt. These are my personal experiences. If you're some of the type of people that I spoke about, and there's so many types of dysfunctional people and problem people that I worked with. The cowboys and the mavericks and the You know, again, the narcissists and the incompetent, it's just a few of them just kind of ruin some of the experiences. So I'm not saying offices are bad. They're good for some people. I just think they stopped being the place for me. And maybe that's what early retirement is all about. Not escaping work, but escaping the version of you that tolerated these type of things that are annoying about being in an office. And I just don't want to have to be forced to tolerate that any longer. I can choose to walk away from someone and not be around someone if I don't like them, if I don't get on with them, I don't like their personality. I'm not being forced into toleration. I just don't have the patience for it anymore. You know, we're all imperfect. I'm self-aware enough to know that I might fall into one of these categories of people someone doesn't like. I probably fall into a category that I've not even named. I don't know how. I don't know what I do wrong. This is my video. If they want to make a video about some people like me, God bless them, and I'd be curious to watch. I'd find it comical. I don't get offended by this. Let me hear in the comments if you think I'm being a little too hyperbolic here or even exaggerating. So, am I being cynical or am I just being typical? Or have you felt this too? Share in the comments below. I think this is a bit of a fun discussion and it's very fresh. The temptation to go back to earn more income, to add a little buffer is there and it's real and it's still very fresh. But for any of you who have retired, what's one thing you don't miss? Share in the comments below. Or would you struggle to go back and suck it up and tolerate the things you hate just to a little more buffer, a little more financial security? Thank you, everybody. Take care, God bless, and take it slow.